So ethos can also be how the speaker presents themselves as credible or trustworthy. So meaning maybe how they're dressed. Are they dressed up, in this example, in a white coat of a doctor or a dentist? Are they dressed in a suit and tie? You'll hear a lot with politicians about the color of their tie or the color of their shirt. Do they need to wear a red tie to present themselves as more credible or trustworthy as a Republican versus a blue tie for Democrats? It can also be their stance towards the topic and how they conduct themselves considering that stance. So, do they need to come across as really passionate about this topic? We don't want them to seem angry or aggressive because that might diminish their credibility in certain scenarios, um, including maybe like let's think political office. You don't want them to sound super angry and aggressive in a speech, generally speaking. And then lastly, it could also be how they establish their source of knowledge about the subject. So either maybe they're an expert because they've experienced this thing, or they're a scientist or researcher, or maybe they quote a lot of experts like Greta Thunberg did. She always says, look to the scientists. These are the people I'm quoting. These are the where I'm getting my facts are from actual experts. So on the right is an example of what I mean by all of this. So obviously they've shown someone in a white coat who is presumably an actor pretending to be this dentist, or maybe actually Dr. Satbir Golar. I don't know. But they are using this dentist who is credible and trustworthy because they're an expert in order to recommend Sensodyne for teeth sensitivity. So that is an example of ethos, is how you present yourselves, what you're wearing, how you're speaking, and also whether or not you're an expert or you use an expert to emphasize your point. So the last thing that I want you to do with the rhetorical strategies today is to think back to the last argument you had. I want you to think about who you were arguing with. So that would be your audience, and what you were arguing about. So your purpose. What were you trying to convince them to believe, or vice versa? And I want you to think about at least one example of a rhetorical strategy, so ethos, logos, or pathos, that you used to try to persuade them, and whether or not it worked. And you can even, if you like, think about if it didn't work, why it didn't work. That could be really interesting. Thinking about how well rhetorical strategies match up with the target audience, and how that affects how effective the strategies are. So one thing that I put on Blackboard that I'm not going to go all the way through is this PowerPoint on pre-writing and brainstorming. This is for you guys. We're going to be turning in our outline on Monday next week. So I want you to, in your free time this week, to go through this PowerPoint that takes you through the steps of brainstorming and pre-writing. Remember, that's the first step of the writing process. And it guides you through literally what questions you should be asking yourself, how you should be approaching, firstly, the rhetorical situation, your first impressions about the speech, the purpose, audience, all of that, and then moving on to rhetorical strategies and how well they work to make the argument effective. So I want you to go through this and have it ready for you, because it will really help you in writing your outline on Monday next week. So make sure you go through this PowerPoint. I won't go through all of the questions because they're self-explanatory and things we've been talking about for the past 2 weeks. Otherwise, the only other thing in here for this week is your week 6 discussion board post, so make sure you go and do that. It is a reading in the Norton Field Guide in the chapter about arguing, and it deals with rhetorical strategies in a slightly different way than the things I explained in the PowerPoint today, so that could be really helpful to you to think about ethos, logos, and pathos in a slightly different way, in different words. And then you're also asked to respond to the week 5 discussion board post for this Thursday. So make sure you do that as well. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out and ask me. Otherwise, have a great week.